My name is Courtney Colson, a female to male to female detransitioner, and on this channel we like to try and find out what the hell is wrong with me. On this episode, we will be delving into autism. So, if you've been watching my previous videos, you will know that I seem to have autism for about 15 years of my life. That is correct, I was not born autistic. I do not consider myself autistic any longer. But there's a period of my life there where I had that experience. I had every symptom. I cannot explain it, but I will attempt to do so here. So, I would like to make it clear that I had a very loving family, very normal childhood. A lot of people have, in the comment sections of other videos going, yes, your issues are clearly the result of trauma. I think the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me as a kid was they cancelled Firefly after one season, am I right? But yeah, I had a very happy, perfect childhood, had lots of friends, very athletic. We spent all day, every day outside, on our bikes, in our pools, and having sleepovers. So I had absolutely no issues. And I was fairly confident and independent for a kid that age. And then I turned 11 on my 11th birthday. We had a pool party, it was a sleepover. Next morning I wake up and I just don't feel so good. And I remember Mum makes me pancakes, I eat them, I bring them back up again. And I was just so sick for the next few days, maybe a week. And it was just gastro. As far as I can tell, it was just a normal bout of gastro. It took about a week. I was never the same after that. I had IBS symptoms all of a sudden. I used to be able to eat anything. And suddenly I've got just horrendous sensitivities to food, always suffering. My personality changed, very paranoid, introverted. They misdiagnosed me with depression for a while and put me on medication that made me even more sick and really nauseated. And I'd have these meltdowns, violent meltdowns. I was just suddenly a different kid. But I think because I was about 11 at the time, well, that's puberty. The kids change. They become all angsty and weird and goth when they turn that age, which, yeah, I definitely went through a goth phase. Very misanthropic, had no empathy, was a complete asshole. I was a horrible kid. And that suddenly made things really difficult at school. I did fine in primary school, had lots of friends. High school was totally different. I couldn't talk to anyone, I just stayed off by myself, would hide out behind the chapel usually. Strangely enough though, I gained a kind of following because I guess I was just so belligerent and so fearless that the other kids admired me. I remember I was kicked out of high school because I couldn't get support for autism. The idea was floated around pretty much all of high school. Like, she's different, she's special, something's going on there. Couldn't get diagnosed with autism. We went to a therapist who said, I don't like labels. I don't like putting people in boxes. People put kids in boxes, it's terrible. And I don't agree with it. So she's just got a big imagination. Thanks, chap. Never graduated high school. Hey. But, being kicked out in third year, not because I'd really done anything wrong. I didn't have any violent meltdowns at school. But I had no idea what was ever going on around me. I didn't realize how oblivious I was until I got better. Everything was so confusing. I had no idea what people were saying. I knew, I could hear, I wasn't a problem with my hearing, it was just, nothing was sinking in this skull of mine. I was just super obsessed with things, so during that time, I loved The Mighty Boosh, I loved Hellboy, Spawn, I'd draw them all over my books and stuff. But yeah, I hadn't really done anything wrong, I was just a bad student, never did homework, never did anything I was supposed to do. I just didn't really understand a sense of consequences or the future or anything like that, where I just, my parents pay for this school, I don't want to be here, I don't care about my career or my future. I'm not thinking about those things. And yes, this video does tie into detransitioning, so I probably should mention that up front, but whatever. Yeah, not thinking about the future. That's something that's so common with detransitioners, because when they do first transition, they're just like, I've got to be a boy or girl, whatever it is, I've got to be opposite gender, I've got to transition. They're so fixated on that, and they're not capable of making long-term decisions. I didn't think I wanted kids when I was 23. When I transitioned, I wasn't even a child, but then I was dealing with autism, so that may have delayed my ascent into maturity, but we'll get to that. I had all sorts of sensory issues and social issues, couldn't make eye contact, not good at communication, and yet, I was invited back to, I went to this party. One of my few friends, she was having her 17th or 18th, and had everyone else from school over. They hadn't seen me for about 2 or 3 years. And yeah, apparently I'd gained some kind of reputation as a badass. I was just said whatever I thought, didn't give a thought to consequences of my actions, which to a teenager makes someone pretty cool. To an adult, just makes you an asshole. After high school, I did a few TAFE courses, same thing. I made some friends, was mostly just drawing in my sketchbooks, was not applying myself at all because I just didn't understand why. The whole school system, all I understood was you had to go to school. When you're under 18, you've got to go to school. Okay. I didn't understand. No one really explained to me why we were at school, though. It was just glorified babysitting. And I wanted to be a video game dev. I wanted to be a comic book artist. All these really impractical things. I had always been good at drawing, and that is basically what I focused on, is getting into fields that use that, having no clue of the practicalities. There's no industry for that in Perth. There is, and even in ideal circumstances, it was very difficult careers to get into, especially with a huge shift from traditional animation to digital. But again, no concept of how the real world works. So after that, I decided I wanted to go to WAPA, the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts. My mum found out all about it, and at that time I was really getting into cosplay. I was really good at sewing. Apparently really good at sewing, because the head of the costume department said that my sewing skills were, and I quote, second to none. I can't believe that, but I was, very arrogant. I came across as arrogant. I don't know if I really was arrogant. I was, misanthropic, thought I was better than everyone. So, and I should probably mention, I went to WAPA, I was having all the same issues I had before, but now I actually cared. I really wanted to succeed with this costume degree, so finally got me diagnosed when I was 19, that was first year of WAPA, and at that point I actually did want the diagnosis, because I realized it was an issue. When they were first floating the idea of autism when I was about 15 or 16, I was so upset. I went on this forum I used to hang out and go, they're saying I'm retarded, and, I was just really shitty about it. Because there was no autism pride at the time. There was no neurodivergence acceptance or what have you. But by the time I was 19, I realized, look, this is a disability. This is obviously an issue that I'm not aware of, but seems to impact how I relate to other people. When we talk about neurodivergent pride, and you have this autism community that, they're very vocal about acceptance of autism, and there shouldn't be a cure, and neurotypicals just have to get used to us and how we work. They're not seeing the full picture. I'm standing here having seen both sides, and I understand the difficulties. I really do. And when you're autistic, you don't realize how you might upset someone. You cannot see that, you don't understand, but you seem to offend people all the time. And, oh yeah, so heads up, I guess talking about autism and the idea of a cure will offend a lot of people, but I think it's something we really need to discuss. What is autism? What role does it play in our society? And no one wants to have that conversation because the autism community doesn't even want to have that discussion at all. And then you've got some neurotypical people, like Autism Speaks, only focusing on a cure. Now, what's my opinion on curing autism? I think it's complicated, but I think it should at least be something we look into, and that there is a choice. Because, the autism community likes to pretend that autism's so great and wonderful and we don't need to change at all, ignoring the fact that there are people who are lower functioning, who can't speak, who can't even go to the bathroom by themselves. That's not good, and those people don't want that either. So I think it should be a case-by-case thing where, okay, well, you've been diagnosed with autism. Does it impact your life? Do you find there are advantages to being this way? Okay, cool. Go ahead. Live your life. Do your thing. But for someone who, is violent, is nonverbal, is going to need care forever, why would you do that? I absolutely believe in accepting and supporting disabled people. I'm not saying we should euthanize them, but shouldn't we be trying to make people's lives better? I don't understand that. I went from being very upset at about 16 when they suggested I might be autistic, then when I was 19, understanding I had a disability and needed support for this, so I got the diagnosis. Did I get support? No. So WAPA's idea of giving me support was gathering the entire class together. Some woman gives them a lecture on autism, doesn't ask me how my autism works specifically. And so their ideas of assistance did not help at all. So people started treating me like I was a leper, They're just giving me a wide berth, not knowing how to react to me all of a sudden. And also, see, I'm not good at reading. I have no problem reading, I don't have dyslexia, I don't have any of those. I'm just real slow. I need absolutely no distractions. I mean, I'm better now. But at the time, absolutely no distractions. I have to be like in a quiet room with nothing else in it, just focusing on that, and then I can focus on that text. So when I would say, I need help with this, my teacher would say, well, it's in the instructions. Did you not read it? I went, I guess I tried. And she went, but aren't autistic people better at reading than verbal instructions? No. No, I'm definitely someone who, even to this day, will prefer to watch a YouTube tutorial on something. And now I'm doing a mechanics course online, and that's the perfect thing. I just watch the video, pause it, take the notes, go back. I can go all the way back to the beginning. I can, I do not know how I managed to get through as much school as I did, because I cannot function like that at all. My way of learning is definitely, give me a video, give me a visual demonstration of this thing, and I can wrap my brain around it. Give me the time to actually illustrate what it is, especially with mechanics, that so I can memorize, okay, this is what a crankshaft looks like, this is what a camshaft looks like, very similar, but different in significant ways. It also helped me to wrap my brain around, okay, so this is how this rotates, and this is how this connects to, not a hope in hell if I was in a physical classroom and someone's just talking about that. So that's a major issue that a lot of autistic people face, is that we don't give them a lot of options in terms of how they are educated. And I think that's the case for even neurotypical people. We all have a preference to how we absorb information. I got through 2 years of WAPA. I actually had to stop, not because of autism, or they basically wanted me gone. That was not a place for weakness. It was highly competitive, and you had to be at the top of your game. and in second year and third year, especially third year, it was all management stuff. And I mean, I couldn't manage my way out of a paper bag. Like, I had no social skills, talking to a whole group of people. No hope. So I finished in second year, but I had chronic fatigue in the third year, so I didn't pursue third year at all. And I will talk about chronic fatigue in another video, but for a majority of my 20s, I have been sick. And that's what actually inspired me to adjust my diet, see what helps. I was doing keto, but that was a lot of plants. It was basically vegan. Then I was getting sicker and sicker. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I switched over to the carnivore diet. And that was a miracle cure. You know, my digestive issues went away, chronic fatigue got better, and most curiously. So, I don't know if it's carnivore or if it's fasting, because I was doing 1 meal a day. I was unintentionally doing 1 meal a day before I switched to carnivore, because I was just so sick I could barely eat. I would maybe pick at something, and that's less than a snack. But yes, I was doing 1 meal a day and carnivore. But whatever it was, my body really healed in ways I didn't even expect to. So I was very much in the autism community, all about autism pride, neurodivergent acceptance, all of that, very, very vocal about it. Very much in that SJW community that is frankly unreasonable, and we'll get into that. But I remember I went to, it was a Christmas in July party with a friend, and I felt so comfortable. I was making eye contact, I was making conversation, I was being charismatic, I didn't say anything inappropriate, and I was so aware. You know, I went through a phase where I was staring too much, and this is, probably about 2-3 years ago. Yeah, it's hard to, somewhere in that, about 2 years I think is probably more accurate. But yeah, I went through a phase making too much eye contact because I'd never done it before. And suddenly I was seeing all this stuff that people's faces were doing, and I could hear things in their tone of voice, and it was amazing. And it was a subtle, slow thing. But that day specifically really just hammered it home. Oh, wow. I've been missing out on all this stuff, and now I can see it. So I was doing a podcast called Saint Elsewhere with a former friend of mine, Callum. I mean, hell, I would still be his friend, but he decided he didn't want to be my friend, and we'll get into that in a minute. But we were constantly talking about the representation of autistic characters in the media and how frustrated and disappointed we were. And so we decided, hey, why don't we do a podcast? And we review these things and help spread education. People can understand why these depictions are wrong and why they're dehumanizing. And we did that for a few years. It was very hard to get him to record regularly. Autism, I guess, organization. And he had a lot of mental health issues. But, so yeah, we called it Saint Elsewhere because there's a show from the 1980s called Saint Elsewhere. And the finale is very strange. It zooms out of the hospital. It's just a hospital drama, nothing genre. Zooms out, and it's actually a snow globe being held by this autistic boy named Tommy Westfall. And there's something called the Tommy Westfall theory, where all TV shows in the 80s are connected. You're going to go down a rabbit hole. I'm sorry. It's just, if you look into it, you will not be able to stop. But yeah, so Tommy Westfall was this autistic character who was non-verbal, and yeah, apparently he created Saint Elsewhere. And we decided that's a really good name because we called it Perspectives from Outside the Snow Globe. So it feels like we're watching, when we watch human people, it's like we're watching, well, as Temple Grandin said, an anthropologist on Mars. We do feel like we're watching aliens. And yeah, I was really happy on that show. But Callum was very intense SJW. He would go on Twitter, he would get really, really upset about things, and then he would rant at me, or he would do it on the podcast, and I'd feel really uncomfortable. But I didn't say anything about it, and I just sort of... And that's another... Autistic people tend to just agree and go along with things if there's this group pressure. So I really got swept up into the whole SJW thing. I was not looking at transgender stuff, but because I was so absorbed in all the autism, SJW, advocacy, whatever you call it, I was getting a bit of that as well, and just that idea of we have to accept everybody and not question anything. No. So I think that's how I had not thought about it until now. Because every other detransitioner says, I was looking at Tumblr, I was looking at transgender people on Tumblr, or YouTube, or anything like that. And yeah, no, I didn't really. I think it was specifically through just that autism stuff and being in the SJW community in general. That's how I got there. There were a lot of ideas that, well, especially Callum was pushing on that show of just, there should never be a cure. We shouldn't even talk about a cure. We can't discuss whether or not there is some connection between autoimmune conditions and autism, or vaccines and autism. It was just taboo. And that's not a good attitude to have. We should be able to discuss anything freely, because that's how you come to a greater understanding. And when I got better, so we had actually... This is a whole drama. So we, Callum and I, for saying elsewhere, we got these guests on. I didn't really know who they were, but Callum reached out to them. And I wasn't even told that we were actually recording a Saint Elsewhere. I was just told, we're doing a Pride and Prejudice review. Okay. So I thought these other people were doing a podcast, and organizational skills and communication, autism. Autistics, they struggle with it. But oh my god, it was 3 or 4 autistic people on a podcast, and I had to edit that, and we were talking about a mini-series, and it was just, oh good lord, 4 hours I think I had to edit, and I never saw the light of day, because I was waiting for our guests to give feedback, which is very unusual. If you've ever done any podcasting, you don't tend to have to wait for the guest to give the all clear. Well, months pass, I don't hear anything, but I sort of nudge them, hey, can we upload this now? It's been ages, heard nothing. So I went, okay. And Callum was ignoring me as well, could not contact anyone. But he had unfriended me, he had photoshopped, I'll put the image up, he photoshopped this image of Stalin that seemed kind of threatening about me. I had no idea what was going on, so I went, okay. I know how to get your attention. I'm going to upload this Pride and Prejudice episode. And then things came out. So this is about a year with no contact. This is a year after the recording. And turns out that... So I had told Callum, it seems like my autism symptoms are going away. I'm not obsessive. I don't have sensory issues. I used to need to wear headphones or earplugs to go to the movies, sunglasses all the time. I'm looking at a ring light right now. I don't give a shit. Couldn't stand being touched, and I wonder if my asexuality at the time had something to do with that. Now, we'll go into this. There's a video, Third Puberty, go look that up, but suddenly have a libido. So now no problem with touching. But I felt like a feral cat, always on edge, always waiting for something to attack me. That's what autism's like. You are a wild animal, and everything is a threat. Every sound, everything. It's a horrible way to live. I don't think there's any other way to put it. I didn't realize how terrible it was until it was switched off, and you're like, oh, wow, I can actually fully relax. I used to, and I think it is related to diet and inflammation as well. It used to take me hours to fall asleep. I used to think that was normal, but I think it might be an autism thing where it's just so hard to switch off and so hard to calm down. But it may also be inflammation in the diet. Is autism caused by inflammation? Is autism autoimmune? Because I can say for a fact that I was not displaying any autism traits as a young child. My mum says the same thing, like, you were perfectly normal. I don't know what happened. And so I do have to wonder if there was something wrong with my gut bacteria or my immune system after I got gastro, and I just didn't get better. I continued on a standard diet. Well, I was eating a lot of carbs. Most autistic people love plain, bland food. So it was a lot of bread, a lot of crackers, a lot of pasta. No wonder I was so sick. I was anemic. I was vitamin D deficient, and no one was doing anything about it, and I couldn't keep food in, because it's plants. I can't eat plants. I mean, humans can't eat plants, but I especially cannot tolerate them. No one knew that. They just prescribed me Metamucil, just drink this fiber stuff, which made me even worse, because human beings aren't supposed to absorb fiber. That's why it's called insoluble. We can't digest it. Our intestines aren't long enough. But yes, going back to Callum, he, in a very childish way, decided not to talk to me about this issue, or that he had a problem with me curing autism, if that is even what it is. He just went, "Oh, no, I'm happy for you. No, I'm happy." And then cut me out of his life. And he went and told our guests private information that I had told him about, my autism symptoms seem to be going away. And they sent me an email finally saying, "We don't want anything to do with someone who supports a cure for autism. You're basically an anti-vaxxer." Very mature. And that's the thing, is that's what autistic people are like. Very emotional and have very low emotional intelligence. So they weren't able to just have a discussion with me. And that's all. I talk about this in all my videos. The worst distance between two people is misunderstanding. And what's the worst that can happen in a conversation? We've all had to have hard conversations, those difficult ones where you're breaking up with somebody, or you're concerned about them. Maybe their opinions are very different from yours. They're going in a radically different direction. They're making life decisions that you don't think are right. You have to have those conversations. You have to admit that you're afraid and it makes you uncomfortable, and then persevere. Obviously, I have the advantage that I just don't feel anything. I don't care. I mean, I'll specify. I do feel things. I just don't feel emotional pain. Go watch my video, Emotional Analgesia. Yeah, always been incredibly fearless, never afraid to speak my mind. And so, I said, "Oh, you think I betrayed you? I didn't betray you at all, Callum. You're the one who freaked out and cut me out of your life and ruined the podcast. I just said, oh, my autism symptoms need to be getting better. I didn't even say I'd cured autism." So yes, that comes back to the question. Was I ever autistic to begin with? What is autism? Well, nobody freaking knows. And that's something I come back to over and over again when I get into these debates, when I tell people online I seem to have reversed my autism symptoms, and they say, well, maybe you weren't autistic, maybe you were misdiagnosed, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Well, no one knows what autism is. It's very likely that it has more than one cause. And that's something I talk about a lot. Say, for example, chronic fatigue syndrome it's a syndrome. It's symptoms. It's a collection of symptoms. We don't call it Asperger's syndrome anymore. We call it autism. But it was a syndrome. It was not a disease in and of itself. And so I firmly believe that it isn't any one thing. I think autism is a collection of symptoms that appear for a variety of reasons. If someone is left in solitary confinement, if a child is abused in those formative years, if someone has an autoimmune disease, for whatever reason. There are so many things that cause someone to suddenly start having those behaviors. And we simply just don't have the science to explain what autism is. Anyone telling you, well, no, you have to be born with autism, well, they're lying, because we have no concrete evidence that that's the case. It could be caused by a variety of things in the womb, and there is suggestion, early studies, that perhaps there is a correlation between transsexuality and autism, because there's a lot of transsexual autistics. It could just be the way our brain works. We have a very rigid way of thinking. Men are this, women are this, and I'm not woman enough, so I should just be a man. Or it could be that, so through pregnancy, there's a few periods where there's a sudden burst of testosterone. And if this isn't released correctly and in the right amount, it can lead to autism and transsexuality, or at least that seems to be the case. I'll find some citations for the footnotes there. And there are many people who claim that their child was autistic and then they removed dairy and gluten from their diet, and suddenly they were a lot better. So what was that? Were they just lying? Well, there's clearly something more going on here. And then in my case, not being born this way, but just suddenly very dramatically shifting mentally. And it wasn't like there was nothing to imply that it was like schizophrenia or any other condition. It really was autism. I've done a lot of research into autism. I had autistic friends. I was very much a part of the community. And a lot of those experiences were my own. So are you going to sit there and tell me I wasn't autistic? No, I absolutely was. There's not a doubt in my mind this was something autoimmune. And changing my diet solved that. It's a gut bacteria issue, whatever it was. So how does that tie into being transgender? Well, as I mentioned, that rigid thinking of, well, I'm asexual, I'm into a lot of male interests, I don't need to be a woman. What's the point of being female? You know, being female sucks, people don't listen to you, they don't treat you right, you have to put so much more effort into your appearance because people are so critical of it. Women are weaker and smaller, who wants to be female? So I just logically concluded, being male is better. I wasn't born with gender dysphoria, I just suddenly snapped, and I go into that in my other videos, but yeah, I think autism had a role to play because autistic people have a very different relationship to their bodies and to society and all those social norms they don't fit into so easily. And it's interesting that now my autism symptoms have gone away. So I'd say about 2 years ago, my autism started to get better. And then less than a year, so this is March, so October, November, I decided to detransition. And I think it makes sense. There was this, once the autism went away and I was less hyperfixated on things. I think that's the thing, is when an autistic person wants to transition, they hyperfixate. And I was absolutely like that. I just, no, gotta be a boy. No, gotta do this immediately, gotta rush into it. And I think there are a lot of autistic people being convinced that they're transgender and rushing into it. And because they're adults, you can't really stop them. But I can say from experience that when you are autistic and you're in your 20s, you're much closer to someone who's probably in their mid-teens. Especially at that point, I had never lived alone. I had no independent living skills, or barely. I mean, I helped clean the house and cook and clean, but very little independence. I was still used to my mum doing a lot of things. So, yeah, I think autistic people are amongst the most vulnerable when it comes to transitioning when it's not necessary. And that's why I want it known that, hey, a lot of people detransition. Let's find out why. Let's make it easier to diagnose these people before they transition. So a lot of people with borderline personality disorder transition, a lot of people with autism, a lot of these conditions put them at high risk of rapid onset gender dysphoria. And that was definitely the case for me, where I love to cosplay, I idolize all these male characters. It makes sense that I just hated being a girl, but it was social dysphoria. It wasn't actual dysphoria. I realize I'm in a very unique position, privileged position, to be able to talk about the autistic experience and the neurotypical experience, and to know what both are like from both perspectives. And I think from an autistic person's perspective, you have these organizations like Autism Speaks that just want to get rid of you, that portray you as a monster, as a burden, and you don't get a lot of support. It's very hard for you to navigate the world. You just want more understanding and acceptance. And I think, yes, we should strive for that. But then on the neurotypical side, well, being around an autistic person can be difficult. There are some parents who love their autistic kids and they get along really well. That's fine, that's great even. But for some parents, they're just not ready for that, and it is very difficult. And it depends how severely disabled they are as well. And that's the word I mean, disabled. I was living with a disability. It was a handicap. And I don't agree with the autism community where they say, oh, autism is just a social disability. If people were more accepting and tolerant, then we'd be fine. No. There are, especially for the lower functioning, that the autism community doesn't want to focus on low functioning people. They seem to want to focus on the higher functioning and acceptance for those people. And that's good, that's great. But you have to acknowledge that this is a very difficult condition to live with, or for a family to look after. There's a lot of financial ramifications there. So I don't think the autism community is really... It's an echo chamber. It's not considering the full impact of the condition. They only know from their own perspective, oh, well, I'm autistic, and I'm proud, and I'm happy to be the way I am, and I don't want to be cured. And if I'm cured, am I even the same person? And as someone who has been cured... No, you are not the same person. So that is something you have to consider as well. I radically changed. I didn't have that obsessive thinking anymore. And that was wonderful, actually. I was so obsessed with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, the Alien prequels. I mean, I was just obsessed with Alien in general. To the point that I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I didn't want to think about it anymore. But I just... was so hyper-focused, and that's something that I don't hear a lot of autistic people talk about, is that the obsessiveness can be draining. You want to stop talking about it, you want to stop thinking about whatever it is you're obsessed with at the moment, and you can't. You're trapped. And I don't miss that at all. It's nice that, now, I'm definitely passionate about, I'll always be the type who loves to do a real deep dive and really research things, and I love cars, I love mechanics, I am enjoying studying that, but it's not all I talk about. Although I caught up with my mum for brunch recently after going to a classic car show, so I was just like, oh, and there was this Impala from like 1958, and it was, so I was very excited. But other conversations I have don't even mention cars. I can talk about other things. And it's just... there's this great tension that is gone from my mind. That... it was like I was overclocking myself, if you know computer terms. I was overclocking. Whereas just, there was so much sensory input, it was overwhelming at all times. And then I was thinking super fast and super intensely about one thing, and it does affect the way you live. Every aspect of your life, the way you think, the way you interact with others. And it was fine, I think I was getting through life okay, but it was always, as an autistic person, I knew, well, I might not ever live independently, I might not ever get my driver's license, I might not ever, I had to think about a future where I didn't have the usual experiences that most adults have. And that reminds me, Sonichu, that hybrid of Sonic and Pikachu, guy who created it, Chris Chan, is now a trans woman. And there's some speculation that he might have been bullied into thinking he was trans. Huge if true. I don't know enough about it, but when I first heard that, I thought that rings true for me, because autistic people really do, ironically, they do want to fit in. There's this misconception that they don't have feelings and they don't care about fitting in, but they do, and they can be absolutely swayed by peer pressure. That happens to me a lot. I would get into trouble. I almost got arrested once because I was just doing what my friends did, and I thought it was funny and cool and whatever, just getting that kind of validation, not really understanding the consequences of my actions. And so I absolutely believe that autistic people can be very easily persuaded that, oh, you're non-binary, oh, you're transgender. That doesn't seem out of the question for me. I feel like that covers everything. I don't know. This is a little bit shorter than my regular videos, but yeah. I think I'm much happier now. I didn't realize how difficult autism was. There are advantages, an intense imagination and just being able to be so passionate and focused on a thing, being able to research something with this intensity and attention to detail, memory. Those things aren't as sharp for me now as they used to be. So I've lost some of the advantages, I've lost pros and cons. But overall, it feels like I finally entered adulthood. I can connect with other adults. I can connect with reality. That's the hardest thing to describe, is that if you were to talk to me when I was autistic, I would think, oh no, I've got a pretty good sense of the world. Yeah, I'm not that weird. I just think that neurotypicals are just so intolerant. No, it was like I was in black and white and someone described color to me and went, nah, okay, got it. Orange, red, what is that about? Yeah, no, now my world's in color. Now I see the nuance. Now I can really connect with people. I can listen and really understand and really, say things that are actually appropriate and forging deeper, more meaningful relationships. There's just so much that it becomes increasingly difficult with autism the more severe it gets. So, yeah, I do think there is a cure for autism. I don't think it should be compulsory, but as someone who feels better now, I realize what I was missing out on. And I know this video is probably going to piss off a lot of autistic people, but that's just the truth from my experience. And I think it needs to be shared. I think we need to understand what autism actually is. We need to do more research. We need to know what it is on an evolutionary level, on a biological level. We just don't know enough. And so when someone like me says, well, I wasn't born that way, definitely had the symptoms, and then it went away with a change in diet, I end up in a situation where I have no support, I'm being attacked by strangers on the internet, and, well, that's just terrible. My whole experience that I've talked about on this channel, detransitioning and coming out on the other side of autism and dealing with emotional analgesia, I've never had support. I've never had any sort of community where I can turn to. I can't talk to a doctor or a therapist and ask, well, so what can I expect from this experience? Or, what have other people gone through? Because no one else has, or well, at least with at least there's a growing number of detransitioners. But in regards to autism, I don't know too many detrans autistic people who are really out there talking about their experience, but I'd be really curious to know, because I think autism definitely plays a huge factor in this social dysphoria, because we already feel like weirdo outsiders, and we already have this weird connection to our body. Our senses are turned way too high. We overthink things. Yeah, I absolutely think autism played a significant factor in me transitioning, and when it went away, that was a fact. That was the beginning of the end of my transgender life. I think I started to wake up to myself and really understand who I was and really connected to my body in a way I never had before. Alright, that about covers it. See you, Space Cowboy.